All right, let's do it live on a Tuesday edition of the program. Merely Bo, no Z, no Gibbe, but I've got Uno and I've got Ocho. We'll have Bill Bender joining us at 2 o'clock of the sporting news. Eric Edholm will join us as well in the 2:30 hour on the NFL draft, his latest mocks of the NFL.com. We will have Z in a way. He and Vic will reminisce about all good things CBD. So you have those things to look forward to, which are very, very nice. It just was awful rain much of the morning, and then it's going to be like this, and then it gets dicey, from what I understand this evening. I was looking at the apps. There's warnings, threats, and from a piece of video I saw this morning, I don't know if it's going to get all the way up here, but I did see a piece of video this morning out of Kentucky that showed a UK student being blown against a statue this morning. Did you see that, Uno?
I did, yeah. The maps that I saw, too, were like just north of Columbus was like the super dangerous cutoff, but we're still not in a great rain zone later on today. Yeah, and it looks like we are in a, at some point there could be like a tornado issue, and it's big time down there. Like south of us, it's big time tornado threat, but that could be in the mix. So pay attention as this warm front becomes a cold front, and away you go on that front. All right, we have some news of the day. The Browns signed quarterback Justin Hardee, special teamer last season with the Jets. It is notable in that this will make Bubba Ventrone very happy, but it is also notable in that he is a graduate of Glenville High School right here in town, University of Illinois. And isn't he the one in the Flacco bit? Yep, that was him.
Win a ship for my guys. Wasn't that that's the story there?
Yep.
So that's very good. So he comes in and he buttresses that, and that adds to that room. So there's a little bit more depth right there. I have to say, it is all quiet on the NFL front. We had news I guess it was 2 weeks ago when I was on vacation, or was it last week from the NFL owners meeting? No, that was 2 weeks ago. So we had a little bit of news then, and then it's been largely quiet from that point since. It's almost like everybody in the sports world kind of takes the 3 weeks of March Madness off and just kind of acquiesces to basketball. And it'd be hard not to. I know I was locked into the women last night. I realize it's an NFL show, but it crossed over. Caitlin Clark transcends. The Final Four is going to be here on Friday. I had a really good friend of mine. He has a daughter in the 5th grade, and her team had a watch party, and they sent me a pic. His wife sent me a pic of the 5th grade team having a watch party, and I think that was probably something that, while incredibly cool, was something that was probably very common. But what also happened last night is I picked Beamsy up from 4th grade AAU practice, and all the little boys were talking about going to watch LSU and Iowa women's basketball last night. I've not seen the ratings yet for this. My hunch is it'll be around 10 million. Something like that, which, while not NFL numbers, dwarfs about everything other than college football and men's basketball in the tournament in terms of the ratings. But the other thing that you have to remember with what happened last night, I'm sure you guys watched it, and I know many of you probably out there did too. It is one thing to be great. It's one thing to have expectations for greatness, and then it's quite another thing to then deliver on those expectations for greatness. Caitlin Clark, who will be here on Friday, they play the late game against UConn, 9 o'clock at Rocket Mortgage. She delivered in the biggest possible way. She had 41, 12, and 7 in the game. I've seen her play a lot, obviously, over covering the Big Ten and kind of paying attention from afar, and then last year's run was pretty magical for them before coming up just short to the national championship game when they lost to LSU. But to have the eyes of the world literally, or at least the United States, on her, on this game, on this rematch with LSU, and then to deliver in that way, man, you have to marvel at that, and you have to appreciate that, because that does not happen all the time, where you have someone who has this promise, who has this expectation, an incredible amount of attention upon them, and them to deliver in the biggest moment. It was 47, 12, and 7. If you watch the game, though, it was even more than that. She really plays like Steph, honestly. Not Steph now. Steph back when he first got up with Golden State, and really even more so Davidson. Everything that they do comes off of her hand. She either scores or she assists a score, or hockey assist. Her great pass leads to a kick out for another shot. I was sitting watching it with NBC last night, who's 12, loves hoops, plays a ton of it. I said, I don't recall there's kind of a LeBron factor to it, not in terms of the way she plays, but in that everything that they did offensively, everything that they get offensively comes off of her. They're entirely dependent, and there's a lot of good players on their team too, kids who can knock down shots and all of that, but it all is predicated on what she does first.
She also, to me, had that Steph factor of every time she shot one of those deep threes, I thought for sure it was going in.
They're all close.
It just doesn't feel like she's ever going to miss in the big situation, and she shot like 9 of 20 from 3, which is incredible.
She was 9 of 18, and then I think she was kind of chasing 10 would have been the record.
Yeah.
So she took some too early in the shot clock, quite frankly, down the stretch as they were trying to close it out. But it's something to marvel at, how great she is, and the fortuitous nature that this is here Friday.
It's pretty cool.
It's amazing. And the tickets for this on the resale market are outrageous. I looked this morning. I think I looked on, I want to say StubHub, like $650 a ticket to you in the door.
I was going to take my girlfriend because we saw the MAC championship at Rocket Mortgage, and that was awesome. But I was blown away by how expensive they were, both for the men and for the women specifically. Like, that price is crazy. She is a hot commodity right now in terms of basketball. Like, maybe.
Well, I think sport.
Maybe.
I think she's turned into. It's one of those things that I'm trying to think, like the most recent. I mean, it happens all the time in the sport that we cover, right? I mean, everything's front and center. The numbers are the numbers, and it happens all the time in college football, which you talk about all the time. The NBA has it from time to time where something's like, boy, you have to see this. And she's been must-see TV for 2 years. For 4 million people, she played Ohio State in February in Columbus, and it was almost 5 million people watched a game on a Sunday afternoon.
And those were the highest regular season ticket prices, I think,
yes,
for a women's basketball game the whole season.
Yeah.
Like, she brings the money in, she brings the views, and everybody wants to see what she's going to do. And she always plays well. Like,
even in
every
the loss
national
down there.
TV, yep.
Yeah, the loss down there, she put on a show. She had over 40. I think it's one thing to be great. It's another thing to every time live up to it. The other thing that we do in this country is we build you up, then we want to tear you down. If you're a hero long enough, you be long enough to see yourself become the villain. So, like, there is a great many people who root against her, who are tired of her, so forth and so on. I don't know how you could be. I think she's joy to watch. I think that team's joy to watch. You're going to get here about as good of a setup as you. The only thing would have been better if this LSU game would have been a Final Four game. But you're going to get them against Connecticut, and then South Carolina's only lost once in the last 3 seasons, and it was to Iowa last year in the national semifinal. So they're 36-0. So if the chalk holds, it'll be Iowa Connecticut for the national title on Sunday at Rocket Mortgage, and that'll be a monster. That will be an absolute monster. You had flag football last night. How'd that go for you? Did you guys win?
Good. Another team win. We are 4-0 now. We've clinched a first-round bye in the playoffs. So that was pretty cool last night.
Don't you want to play the games, though? Like, who wants a bye?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. I do think we want to play them, but it was like a nice goal to have this week, saying, okay, we're going to play to win to get this bye week. Because now there's only 3 rounds of the playoffs, so I think we're already in the semis before we even start playing.
Is there anybody on your level?
It doesn't seem like it. I mean, we ran through every team that we faced.
You crushed.
Yeah.
That's
they
amazing.
let me throw the ball this week. That's how crazy
you got to throw it 5 times.
5 times.
They let you play quarterback, and you completed 4.
Yeah.
What was your longest throw?
I mean, probably like 11 yards, but I was moving
the ball. Did you scramble, or was it a timing route?
Mostly a timing route.
So you drop, you threw it to a spot,
yep,
and away we go. Good job, Uno. And 3 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown.
Back in the end zone. That felt good. Once you get one, you just want to keep getting more.
Does Griff ever watch? Does he come watch you play?
He hasn't.
Why? What's he got going on?
There's not a lot of audience in general. Like, there's not. The only people that really watch are, like, the people who are on the other teams that are playing at the same time as you.
Sad.
Yeah. It is sad. I hope the playoffs have more fans.
To give you an idea of why we're in this calm right now, we've had, obviously, you have the combine, you've had free agency, you've had the pro days for all the college prospects who are hoping to get drafted. Those things have happened. And so the first wave of free agent, all that stuff is done. And so you're just waiting on the draft right now. That's kind of where it is. Like you pull up, and I know you guys do this. You're out here trying to produce the show, and you're trying to find NFL needy things or NFL newsworthy notes. There's not much going on. And so it's kind of a little bit of a dead period. It was natural that there would be one. I would imagine that 2 weeks from now, the draft is the first weekend in May.
It's the last weekend.
Last weekend in April. Okay, so last weekend, I would guess by the time Masters, so it goes Final Four this weekend, Masters next weekend. I would guess by the week leading into the Masters that you will start to see a little more dialogue around the draft. Of course, we're not picking for a long time, so it won't really affect us too much. But I do think you'll get a little bit more NFL news, perhaps potential trades, moving up, moving down. Where do these quarterbacks go? You'll have those conversations as we get a little bit closer to Masters Week, which will be next weekend. Between now and then, though, there's not a whole lot going on. It's a pretty quiet league. Many of the guys, you're on vacation, you're away, you're doing those things before you come back, and that goes for front offices and players alike. But all of it, the business of the league is at a real standstill at the moment. Luckily, you do have these other sports things that are happening with the Final Four and the Masters next week. That said, we do have plenty to get to on the program today. We will go over some of the needs of the teams in our division. Bill Bender covers the division. Also will be here covering the NCAA tournament for the women's side. At the Sporting News, covers the men's tournament. We'll have that for you to look forward to coming up at 2 o'clock. As I mentioned, Eric Edholm will join us coming up at 2:30 on the draft. Do we really believe everything we're hearing on J.J. McCarthy in terms of, is someone really going up to get him? And is it possible that Marvin Harrison will not be the first position player off the board? We will get to all of that with him. We got a little bit of higher, lower, better, or worse coming up, and a little nostalgia turn with Vic and Dr. Z as well. We are off and running. Those are your hot topics presented by Vivid Seats, official fan experience partner of your Cleveland Browns. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Bally Bet, sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns, now live in Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. And the Rolling Stones Hackney Diamond Tour is Saturday, June 15th, Cleveland Browns Stadium. Tickets are on sale now. Visit clevelandbrownsstadium.com/Rolling Stones for more information on that. Did you see the video of Mick Jagger this morning dancing at age 80?
I did not.
80.
I'm sure he looks great.
Killing it.
Yeah.
Killing it at 80. Staying limber. It's a beautiful thing. We had Jameis in here a couple of weeks ago after he had signed, and it was just a treat to get to talk to him. First time I'd met him, I think first time Z had met him as well. Obviously, we'd long been a champion of his play, but we're very excited to have him sign on and be the backup. And he's one of those guys a couple of years ago where anytime there was an open job, we were like, gosh, why wouldn't you see if Jameis could be the guy on that? He was backup in New Orleans for a couple of years and played well when he was there and fits, I think, very much with what Kevin Stefanski wants this offense to evolve into behind Deshaun Watson next year, primarily out of the gun, delivering the ball down the field, and again, out of the shotgun with facing the defense, which is something we didn't do a lot of last year, but something my hunch is we will do a great deal of next season. Jameis was on Theo Von's podcast. This past weekend is the name of the podcast. He talked a little bit about signing with the Browns, his life, and everything. Included the fact of, and we mentioned this when he was in studio with us, he had a gorgeous coat on that he was wearing, a long overcoat. I believe it was camel in color. And Theo asked him about seeing snow in March for the first time. Here's what Jameis had to say.
People rip on Cleveland a lot, you know?
They do. And it's a beautiful city, but, like, we talk about Cleveland, they say, oh, it's cold. It's going to be cold up there. And when you come from Tampa and New Orleans, like, it don't really get cold here. And then it was
get cold. Maybe in the freezer section at Rouse's, that's it.
Bro, but it was one of the moments where, like, I'm getting my physical. But her name was Julie. She'd say, yo, it's snowing. I was like, it's wet. It's snowing out here in March. Like, I ain't never seen no snow in March. So I sent a video to my wife. And I was like, hey, baby, look, it's snowing. And she's like, I am not a kid, Jameis. You don't have to tell me it's snowing. I see it's snowing. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to see no snow right now. I want to see the beach. I was like, I bet you got it. You know, but I guess they're going to talk about the cold.
Back to the drawing board.
I hit it with the like, well, you know, this is going to be our first Christmas where the babies get to play in the snow. You know what I'm saying?
She's like, it's almost May, Jameis. We're doing a Christmas in May.
And we may have snow in May. That's in play.
It's entirely possible.
That's in play. Yeah. Well, he was on that. Yeah, it was the Saints game on Christmas when it was 30 below.
I think he talked about.
So
that
we talked about that when we had him on, that how cold that was. So yeah, that's it. I remember. You know, it's funny. You get those guys. I remember Jarvis when he was here, how excited he was with his kids to play in the snow. The first time to kind of have them at home and playing in the snow. God, Jarvis had a pet deer too. He was, now that I remember, the kids were feeding a deer in his backyard there. So that I miss him. He was great. But that is a funny little anecdote from Jameis there on the weather. Theo also Jameis talked about the excitement on joining the Cleveland Browns. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm happy. I'm happy for increase. I think like that's the biggest part. You know how it is, like any part of your life, like you get to choose how you view it. You being from this city, you know how much this city is, how this city rock with like their football team.
Oh
man,
man,
I'm excited for Cleveland, bro. Like I'm excited to get to work. I'm excited to have an opportunity to be at a storied franchise and bring them hope.
Yeah, and the other thing that is big on this is, and I think it's the stylistic feel that he'll have with the new offense that Ken Dorsey and Kevin Stefanski are putting in. The idea of being behind Deshaun and being all the help that he can, and he talked on that, on the opportunity to sign with Cleveland. Here's what Jameis had to say.
The best thing is when the opportunity presents itself to you, because then you can grasp it. You know what I'm saying? When you are in a position where like you are starving for opportunities, like that's a little bit more challenging. You know, so this one, in this case, man, it was a great opportunity with Cleveland.
You feel good about it there?
Yeah, I feel good about it because how I view it, like, bro, it's the opportunity. It's the opportunity to impact. It's the opportunity to increase. It's the opportunity to better myself.
Right.
You know, and I know I'm a strong component of like change is what you make it, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we need that shift, that paradigm shift to like challenge us, to put us in a new environment.
And so there you go, Jameis Winston on the Theo Von podcast this past weekend, talking about a little bit about signing here, snow for the first time, and what it means to him to be a Brown. He was great when we had him in studio, very optimistic. you gravitate to him. You can't help it. His personality is just so bubbly. We did have football this past weekend. We lamented the stupidity of the UFL opening against the NCAA tournament this weekend, both the men's and women's. I was curious how their numbers would be, and I think it's important to provide context here. If you're launching a spring football league, you're not to be compared with the National Football League. You're not to be compared with college football at the highest level. You're probably not to be compared with, certainly not March Madness or anything like that, even though they kind of forced themselves to by when they launched the league. What you're trying to do is carve your own niche. And what is that? What do those numbers look like? And you're compared against what else would be airing at that time on network television. So for the UFL, what you're hoping for is you got 1 million viewers. You got 1.5 million, maybe you grow it to 2 million viewers. That's what you're hoping for. You don't want to be in the 400,000 or 500,000, 600,000 viewers. For context, golf is non-major golf on the weekends is usually in the 1.5 million range. The live golf is usually around 200,000. So that's a little bit of context on what you're looking for. The NBA is usually 2 or 3 million at best. For some of their big national games. But the UFL debuted this weekend, and we have these numbers now from Sports Media Watch in terms of how it did. So the ESPN, this was on viewers on Fox and ESPN, averaged about 1 million viewers, 1.4 million to be exact. The XFL last February launched at 1.3. The USFL in April of 22 launched at 1.57. So in terms of the draw this weekend, they were 1.3 for the game between St. Louis and Michigan for a rating of 0.7. The Birmingham-Arlington game was 1.1 million, just under a million for D.C. San Antonio, pretty low for Houston and Memphis at 703,000. I would say that those numbers were probably a little disappointing. My hunch is that they would like to be a little bit higher. Last year, the XFL's opening weekend was 1.57, went all the way up to 3 million. The USFL in 2022 debuted with 3 million viewers on NBC and Fox. So it was way up from that point. I do think when they did it, when they merged the USFL and the XFL, I think either one of those names would have been better than creating a new name. I think part of the allure of the USFL relaunching was there was a nostalgia to it with that name. And same thing with the XFL. When The Rock bought that and launched the XFL, there was a nostalgia with He Hate Me and all of those things. And by going UFL, you lose that. You lose that brand. I'm surprised they didn't find a way to keep one of those brands.
Well, it confused me so much that I wrote USFL on the rundown yesterday instead of UFL because that's what my brain had thought of. And I think that's what is the confusion for a lot of people that wanted to watch it because they don't know what the league is.
You had two good names you could have chosen, and somebody just needed to swallow their pride. And instead of merging, they should have just absorbed one. So I don't know which one was more powerful. I don't know if the USFL was more powerful or the XFL was, but whichever one was, one of them should have absorbed the other, and then at least you would have had a little bit of brand nostalgia and a little bit of familiarity with it. All right, coming up next, Z, one-on-one with the great Godfather of Cleveland Browns Daily, Vic Carucci. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Well, here for my great friends at the James B. Beam Distilling Company. Some say that rye is having a moment. Well, my friends, Overholt has been having their moment for over 200 years, and the legacy continues today with A. Overholt, the latest chapter in their ever-evolving story of American rye. Taste 2 centuries of experience can make. It's a spectacular rye, robust Pennsylvania-style rye whiskey. The newest thing in rye is also the oldest thing in rye. It's available now. A. Overholt from the James B. Beam Distilling Company. This one for you as well. If you ever thought about hitting golf balls inside Cleveland Browns Stadium, now's your chance. Thanks to Upper Deck Golf. It's Friday, June 21st, Saturday the 22nd. Enjoy a unique VIP golfing experience while hitting tee shots from the upper deck down to custom greens on Browns Stadium field below. For more info, go to upperdeckgolfing.com and reserve your tee time today. That's upperdeckgolfing.com. And now a trip down memory lane as Z sits down with the Godfather of Cleveland Browns Daily, Vic Carucci.
What a treat. The Godfather, the man who birthed Cleveland Browns Daily from his loins and received his official Cleveland Browns Daily hoodie earlier today. The one, the only, the notorious VIC, Vic Carucci.
First of all, great to be here and great to be
have
with
you.
Secondly, highlight of my combine week is seeing that sweatshirt, that hoodie, which I will wear with great pride, but knowing the backstory, like how this thing has been put to, and it's not just your average hoodie. This thing's got a material,
yeah,
big
there's even
thread
like a
count,
string you can like pull down in the back to keep it nice and taut.
And I think it may have been made in Italy.
It was. You are right.
Which is, perfect for me.
Secured after a lengthy search.
Yeah.
By the great Brad Mellon,
I love it.
Equipment Manager of the Year in the National Football League, and he sourced it. It's like a Nike fashion collab. Crazy.
Take it up. Go ahead.
Don't wash it.
Don't wash it.
That's what he said.
Okay.
So wear it and then let it. Don't get any stains on it.
Okay.
But he said washing it.
Air clean it.
It's a delicate fabric.
Delicate fabric.
Yeah.
I will treat it.
There are only 4.
I feel special.
You should have it.
Thank you.
There is no CBD without you.
Well,
you're the Carucci in the sea.
I love this. I love being with you. What's going on, man?
We're good, man. We're good. When was the first year you came to the Combine?
So, 1987-ish. It was. I think it was the first year here was like 86. I hope I'm getting this right. I'm sure someone's Googling it, but I want to say it was no later than probably 87. 88 sounds a little too late. So 87, and there probably were a dozen of us at the Crown Plaza Hotel. The drill was get a hotel room, find a place to stay, and then camp yourself at the Crown Plaza where the prospects were. It wasn't about what this has turned into with especially like the coaches made available and all that. It was strictly talk to the prospects, which we did, and it was and it was so unsophisticated that you'd ask a player to get another player to bring him out and we do it in the restaurant of the hotel. And, hey, could you go fetch so-and-so for us? And, we'd be standing, and it would be Len Pasquarelli and Howard Balzer.
Okay.
Yeah.
John McClain?
John McClain.
Peter
King. It was a lot of OGs at this group. Rick Gosselin.
Uh-huh.
And you really – and it was one of those guys who had told me, I said, so what do you do in the off season? Go to the Combine. Now, even before that, it was in Dallas. Gil Brandt, of course, the late great Gil Brandt was the godfather of that. And that was the original concept. And even in the early days, that's a good point. The original concept, Nathan, was that this would be the centralized place, number one, and it's still probably one of the most important elements of it, was to get medical information gathered and collected. And that was what the scouts and coaches were most concerned about. Like, what are we really getting here in terms of health? Now, again, big for that to be here, and I think over the years, the hospitals in Indiana have formed such a great partnership with the people who run this Combine. And you wonder in some other cities, they've talked about it moving to maybe back to Dallas, to Los Angeles, that you'd have the same, but it's not. It would never be as centralized.
Yeah, that's why it's so great. So you're approaching your 40th Combine.
Feels something like that. And every I will say every year it feels a little bit different because, first of all, you see the changes, especially in the coaching ranks and the team ranks, in the media ranks. I mean, we're in this massive area, which you asked me back in the 80s, could I picture something like this however many years later, 30 some odd years, almost 40 years later? No way. No way. I see it growing like this. But what would happen is sports writers, especially, this is back before it became, more multimedia. It was growing in that way, but mostly convincing their editors that, you know what, it's a reasonable spend from the budget to send me to this event. I'll get you draft prospects that will backload all the stuff we need for the draft. Plus, we'll talk to other people around the league, and we can gather quotes, and it's content heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably like 12 for me, maybe in that range. 10. Well, we had the COVID year, so probably 11. When I first came, it was the media row was in the concourse of the stadium.
Yes.
And there were maybe a handful of teams that came.
CBD, we set up there,
we were
right?
Set up, yeah.
No, maybe a handful of and that's the other trend, of course, that we're one of the core original teams that had its own radio and of course video, but that too growing added to that, and then the NFL or the combine organizers realized we don't have enough room for all these people, and it was getting. And I will add this, that more than a few coaches and executives and the occasional team owner that shows up said, necessarily love the idea that it's that convenient for these guys to run us down in the hallway and grab us for interviews here, which of course led to a more organized, I'm pointing in the direction of where those press conferences are, more organized way of doing that.
So when you come out here, obviously you've got a Bills focus. You have the Browns in your heart. What are some of the big stories, just NFL-wide, that you're interested in? Because coming here, the thing I like about it the most is, a lot of the information you get happens late at night,
right?
And you're able to go and talk and kind of find things out. So what are some of the things that you're interested in?
Well, you hit the key, and that is the networking ability, and you do get a more relaxed. There is no time during a football season when you're going to have the people who make these decisions as relaxed as they're capable of being. They're the most paranoid humans in the world, football people. I found that out long ago. But capable of kind of chilling a little bit and maybe over an adult beverage somewhere, and you just kick back and have a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal interview that you're going to quote the person.
On the record,
but you're right. You're getting good download and good background. That's one thing. But as far as the issues are concerned, Nathan, I mean, you don't forget that you are here to try to get a feel for the draft. This is usually when most of my homework gets done, or preliminary homework, to get a best feel. I can't say that before this I can tell you, other than the top line names, who are the prospects to look for. But when you're starting to dig deep into the positions, and you're like a team like the Bills that I'm mostly covering, 28th pick, you got to really kind of know the depth of, say, wide receiver.
We don't pick till 52nd.
Right. So. There you go.
That's even straight year without a first-round pick.
More of a challenge. But that all said, I think it's getting the depth of that. I think are there going to be some the competition committee, and that's another change that's happened. This is the beginning portion of the intense work that they do right through the league meetings. So Sean McDermott, the Bills coach, is on that committee for the first time, and it's been interesting talking to him about what's being discussed in those rooms. I think they had their third meeting today of this combine, and he referenced player safety issues, but it was interesting, without revealing too much of what's going on behind those closed doors. He made a point of bringing up kickoffs, and I think we all know that it's a play that's been downsized so much or minimized so much that you wonder, is it going to be just taken out of the game? It sounds like the reverse is happening.
Which is good.
We want to find a way to make an exciting, interesting play more relevant.
You had a Super Bowl where there were 13 kickoffs and 0 were returned.
Right.
And that's exciting. Devin Hester's getting inducted in the Hall of Fame this year. He's the greatest returner of all time.
And as a member of that selection committee, I was happy to see that because
he should have been in immediately, in my opinion.
Well, and I was happy to see it happen to see it for him, even though it's a different guy. But Steve Tasker for the Buffalo Bills has, I think, been a long overlooked, and there's been a prejudice against special teamers because of the amount of or how little they're on the field. And when the decision comes, are you picking a guy who's on the field for 5 plays versus the guy who's on the field for 50 plays? And how do you rectify that in your mind? Well, you know what? It's the impact and the game changing. And he changed the game. He influenced how teams function in their kicking game. So I'm talking about Tester, but now I think you could say the same about Tasker. Now he's in that senior pool, but that might happen. Back to the other thing about what this combine is about.
Well, this is real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I find this.
All right.
I want to Hall of Fame. You got me thinking. So.
All right, sure.
Dion was complaining that now there are too many people in the Hall of Fame, and there should be the special wing for the best of the best, which.
Yeah, the Hall of Famers and then the Hall of Famers.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame. That's how I feel. But
right.
I think one way to conceptualize, if you're trying to think about, and I'm curious to get your take on this, who the best players ever were, is if there were an ultimate game that was played, 2 53-man rosters, are you in that game? If you're in that game, to me, you're in the Hall. And if you're starting in that game, now you're in the Hall. Devin Hester, from the second that he became eligible to be in the Hall of Fame, would have been the first returner chosen in the ultimate football game ever to be played. Right. To me, that means he's got to be in the Hall of Fame immediately.
Yes. No question. And without our rules prohibit me from going into any real depth on what was discussed.
Sure.
But there was a lot of discussion in our meetings.
I want you to use that. I want to use the ultimate game discussion.
I've made a mental note.
Yeah, good.
I'm going to call it the Nathan rule. And look, I think everything you just said there, though, is very true. Words to that effect came up with regard to impact. Obviously, the case was made for him. And then there's point and counterpoint. Okay, back to the how much time do you actually play? How much are you on the field? And are we but here's the thing about football. The game includes people who don't have as many snaps as others. That's just part of the game. And I think ultimately the common sense reaction to a discussion about a specialist player is he's as much part of the game as the quarterback. It doesn't, per Deion Sanders, maybe it doesn't feel like you would put him in the over-the-top Hall category, but I'm not down with that at all. I think that it was a rabble-rousing kind of move, and as a selector, as a voter, look, we never get told how great a job we've done to put a class in. We always picked on by the folks who say, look at who you left out. The worst night of sleep I get every year is the night before the selection meeting, because I know it's not about the criticism, Nathan. It's about the person who's with his family or if he's deceased posthumously, but the family, the friends, the people, and the guy who are just calling them heartbroken and devastated is too soft a term.
Yeah.
It's crushing, and you're affecting that when they're not voted in. And the last thing I just want to say also about the voting process, I never see it as who I'm against. I'm for it. Remember, there's a reduction. We start with 25. We get it down to 15. We get it down to the final 7 or 8. And I'm also on the subcommittee for the coach and contributor category. There's a dozen of us who vote separate from the 68 or so who are on the selection panel, the full selection panel. And again, I'm not against. I'm for these people. They don't let us put them all in. And you know what? They all shouldn't be put in as a group because it diminishes what the Hall is.
Absolutely. I think it's a fascinating thing. And obviously, I learned a little bit more about it this year with Joe Thomas going in.
Of course.
And kind of getting to talk to him about the process and all of that.
Oh, and I can't tell you also how special it feels when you have a personal tie. I mean, being with Joe all the years I was with the Browns. And I remember having a conversation with him in Canton the day before the induction ceremony. It was just such a special thing. One other thing I want to say about this, though, about the combine, the tampering that happens, which is and it's the wink nod tampering because everybody does it.
It's the backbone of the combine, honestly.
It is the backbone of the combine. There you go. Thank you. Because more business is getting done, or the groundwork of business is getting done in these days than gets done at any other point. The agents come here ready for bear, loaded for bear, ready to strike, to do something. They are setting their game plans for the free agency period. The GMs are doing the same thing. Who can we retain? Who do we need to restructure? Who are we saying goodbye to? Who's going to take a pay cut? Who's going to whatever it is? Those conversations happen, and I think the GMs are much busier with that than the scouts are the ones in the stands with let's look at his vertical, let's look at his 40.
The draft's not till the end of April.
Correct.
Like, all the business that really is urgent and was going to even shape what you end up doing in the draft is happening soon.
It's happening soon, and it's happening, and I always think it's fun that you walk through the various lobbies. Obviously, all these hotels are interconnected, and you could stay inside and go into the lobbies of how many different hotels from this convention center, and you just drift. I used to always I'll probably do it tomorrow. The tour of the lobbies just to see who's talking to who. You know what the conversation is. You see Drew Rosenhaus sitting with whoever, Brandon Beane or whoever the GM is, and I know what they're talking about, and it ain't the weather.
Yeah, exactly. All right, talking about the Browns.
Yes.
We finally got to see in the second half against the Ravens, Deshaun, that was why they brought him here. Mm-hmm. Flawless, leads a come-from-behind victory in Baltimore against a team that, for a portion of the season, many people thought was the best team in the NFL. Then he doesn't play again. We get the wild time with Joe Flacco, but now it's back to Deshaun. And that's why you bring in Ken Dorsey, try to help him out. We talked about that on Browns Daily. What do you kind of see from this team as some of the things that they've got to do this offseason to be able to take that leap? I mean, obviously staying healthy can't control that, but to be able to take that leap.
Well, they're as much as it worked out remarkably well, you'd have to say, and why Kevin Stefanski got my Coach of the Year vote, as much as you can say that with 4 different quarterbacks, that can't happen again or anything close to it.
The final 8 in the NFL, only C.J. Stroud missed games, and he missed 2 with a concussion.
And the only quarterback that can play or that needs to play and not only play the fullest of seasons, but take it to that level of what inspired the whole purpose of bringing him aboard is Deshaun Watson. You ask me a simple answer to the question, it has to be Watson or bust. It has to be everything about their season is driving there. Now, they threw an asset at it with the Ken Dorsey hiring. Now, I also think Alex Van Pelt, I have high regard for him. I've known him since his rookie year in the NFL as a player with Buffalo. I don't necessarily know that it was an upgrade at coordinator, but I'm going to tell you it's different. That's my point. I don't think in any way the graph went up or down, because I do have great regard also for Ken Dorsey. I also thought when Ken Dorsey was fired by the Bills, it felt a little scapegoatish, a lot scapegoatish.
Josh Allen felt terrible.
And Josh was crushed because Josh was the reason he got the job, and Josh also was the reason he got fired, and Josh knows it, and he'll probably have a hard time forgiving himself for that and wanting it to happen, even if things worked out well with Joe Brady. All of that said, back to the Browns, Dorsey's learned some valuable lessons about balance offense, and if the sweet spot can be found between getting the max out of Dorsey, as the max out of Watson from Dorsey as the thrower runner, the thrower on the run, but there will be some running component that I think he designs well, and did it for Cam Newton before he did it for Josh Allen as a quarterback's coach in Carolina. And then the running game itself being a presence, being something that takes the pressure off, that all those components are there with the O-line. And I have faith that Stefanski can figure that out and get it done. But here's the other bottom line. Can't succumb to the feeling of pressure, the pressure cooker that is this season, the stakes being what they are. And the realization of that, and sometimes the thought of that, and even if everybody says the right thing, we know what we're doing. It's no different than it is different. We can say it from the outside. They may not necessarily want to acknowledge it. They being the coach, the GM, the whole works. As long as they manage that as well as, manage it well, and then everything else within the team, and you get some breaks with health, there's no reason to think that the Browns couldn't be competing for a division title and a deep playoff run from a division that is pretty balanced. I mean, do we look at the Ravens with fear? Do you say they can't? No, they can play with any of those teams, and I think they can play with any team in the entire conference.
Yeah, and it's a loaded conference.
And it's a loaded conference.
You've covered the league for a long time. It feels like when you look around the AFC, it's as good as it's maybe ever been.
I love that because part of what makes us say that is the C.J. Stroud's factor in Houston, seeing young quarterbacks emerge. A healthy Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Look what that means.
Right.
Again, we know what the Browns have. We know what the Ravens have, and there's that MVP quarterback in Lamar, and then Josh Allen, and I can't believe I'm mentioning them not necessarily last, but the Chiefs aren't going anywhere, and they're going to be just as good. Why does Andy Reid? Andy Reid is going to. I'm making a little prediction here.
Okay.
Going to be signing a contract extension soon. I believe he'll, and rightfully so. And what a shock! Super Bowl winner gets a contract extension. He at 65 has no desire to do anything except what he's doing. And why? He's got a 28-year-old freak as a quarterback who's going to be a freak for at least possibly another 10 years.
And you got to tip your cap to him too and really their whole organization for realizing that they had to change who they were. They became a defensive kind of bully team.
Reinvented themselves.
Yeah, which is incredible.
And that speaks to not only the wisdom and intelligence of a head coach, but selling that idea to your team.
And
Think
the
about
Mahomes, you're not throwing for 450 yards every game.
You convince this quarterback. Some days you're going to be the caddy to the defense. Really, Mr. Dominant Super Bowl MVP, as great a quarterback as I've ever seen, and I'll in the whole juxtaposition of Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, that conversation's real. I mean, there are more pelts on the Brady wall, but it's not just pelts. It's what you see, what your eyes tell you that, oh my God, he can do it. And coming to the realization, he doesn't have to throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. Sometimes, and most of the time, it is make 2 or 3 more plays than the other team.
And
he
what
will.
they did. And then when he needed to, we needed to get a field goal to get in the overtime. He needed a touchdown to win it.
Boom. And and the
There's
same
no
thing
doubt.
you'd say about Brady. Give him the ball last, you're probably going to lose.
At your own peril.
It's
That's right. At your own peril.
Yeah.
A remarkable season and a great Super Bowl win. And again, it sets up, as you talk about, in this AFC, just loaded. And that's when, and not to mention in the Bills division, maybe Aaron Rodgers is coming back.
And if
Maybe he'll get more than 4 plays.
And if he comes back and plays, say 5 or 6, if he comes back and gives them the full season,
they're a force.
They've got to be considered a force. I think they've got a lot of other issues and problems to overcome that are not Rodgers related necessarily. And Rodgers himself identified the culture thing in the building that he didn't like, so that's got to change. And I don't know is that starting from is that emanating from the top? If it is, might not be as fixable, but I'll buy that more of Rodgers gives them a chance. And oh, by the way, don't sleep on the Miami Dolphins.
What a treat. An absolute pleasure.
Same here.
Absolute pleasure to be with you.
Oh, loved it.
We love you.
Love you too.
Thanks.
Love all you guys. Jason Gibbs, my whole crew, Bo. Just seeing it always feels like coming back home, even when even when it's a remote home in Indiana.
This is you've always got the Uncle Victor suite. Yeah, that's always reserved for you. Thanks
Love
so
it.
much, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, buddy.
All right, great stuff with Z and the Godfather of Cleveland Browns Daily, Vic Carucci there. Coming up next, the sporting news. Bill Bender will join us on the AFC North teams and their activities so far this offseason. He will be in town this weekend to cover the women's Final Four. Get your preview of that. The men's side of things as well. In the second hour of the program, Eric Edholm will join us from NFL, his mock draft, the latest mock drafts, where those stand a little higher, lower as well. Second hour coming up next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, second hour here. Be part of one of the most passionate fan bases in the NFL. Join Next Gen STM, presented by Ticketmaster. Official waitlist of your Cleveland Browns. Being a Next Gen STM, the best chance to become a season ticket member in future seasons. Visit clevelandbrowns.com/NextGenSTM to reserve your spot today. Now we had it on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea. Official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. Our good friend, the Sporting News' Bill Bender, joining the program now. We're going to do a lot of hoops with you, obviously, with the Final Four. And I know you're going to be here this weekend covering the women's side of it, but you also keep a very close eye, I know, on the NFL and the college football game and all of that. And I wanted to start there, if you don't mind, my good friend. What have you made of the comings and goings in the AFC North this offseason with the things that it seems like Baltimore obviously had a lot of issues with their free agency where they had a cap issue that they had to solve, and some of those things ended up happening in the AFC North. And this division, just as competitive as ever, my friend, in this offseason kind of proved that.
Toughest division in college football got to be or college football, the NFL.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've got like four.
I know you got a lot going on, brother.
One mulligan. I get one mulligan on this show. Obviously, yeah. I mean, all of them so competitive. The margin is so close, and I think obviously Pittsburgh's quarterback decisions were the boldest move because we can sit here and pick it apart all we want. They did upgrade their quarterback room with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, because in that division you're going up against Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow. It's really good quarterback play, really close games, and yeah, you just said it. Some of these teams have to make some moves.
Yeah, it's amazing too, and you and I spent a great deal of time talking about college football, but you think about the quarterbacks in this division, and if Fields does eventually ascend in Pittsburgh like we all think, you're talking about Fields, Burrow, Watson, Lamar. Those are four of the best and most consequential college quarterbacks of the last 15 years in this division.
Oh, it's some of the best I've seen in person.
Yeah.
I've watched Justin Fields tear up at Ohio State, and Joe Burrow beat Clemson in the national title game. And, Russell, you can take that back all the way to Russell Wilson and how he elevated. He was the one quarterback Wisconsin had, right? If they don't lose back-to-back Hail Marys to Michigan State and Ohio State, Russell Wilson may have played for a national title in college. So that's just me getting NC State references in there this week too with what they're doing on the men's side.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the Bengals, obviously, big question for them. They let go of DJ Reader. Burrow is, I don't want to say there's health concerns, but at a certain point, start to worry a little bit, right? Like
I think it's
had
fair.
2 season-ending injuries already.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I think they're concerned about it, right? I mean, he's had 4 NFL seasons. He's reached the Super Bowl. He's reached the AFC Championship game, and the other 2 he didn't finish with catastrophic injuries. So yeah, no, I think that's a big part of it. I think all these teams are under the gun to be competitive right away. You and I spent a lot of time talking about college football, and I wanted to run this this idea by you. Do you think there is a way, and do you think it is possible for the NFL? Do you think it'll happen for the NFL and college football to work together on this December schedule? Because I know you look at it, I look at it. I'm looking at a 12-game college football playoff, and I'm looking at a finite amount of Saturdays and having to play games on Thursdays and Fridays. And it just feels like if the two could work together. Now, the NFL has shown no interest in acquiescing to anybody. They're going to play Christmas Day on a Wednesday now because they can deliver the ratings and all of that. But I do wonder if a college football playoff Elite Eight game, if it were, would tear enough audience away from an NFL regular season that the NFL would say, hey, this is the perfect minor league system. Let's try to find a way to coexist through December where we can all still get all of our flowers.
Yeah, for sure. And one of my frustrations is, this is a little personal, is when you cover the national championship game, which I've been able to do for several years, you kind of start banging your head on the wall because you're like, my stories aren't being read. What's going on? And the answer isn't anything to do with what I'm writing, no matter how boring or not boring it is. It's because it's going head-to-head with the NFL. And the longer you go head-to-head with the NFL into Week 18, the wild card, the divisional playoff, you're going to run into problems because I just think people care more about the NFL than they do the college football product, which it's just truth. So, and I think one thing, Bo, that I've always thought of is why don't they push the college football calendar up, just start playing the playoff right away? Why are we doing that big break?
Well, my view on it is I think college football should, and I never know if it's push it back or move it up. But you and I have the same idea. I think you play week 1, week 0 in college football. I think you play 2 weekends before you get I think Labor Day is the second full weekend of college football. Then all of a sudden you can move those conference championship games back to the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Now all of a sudden you start the playoffs the next week. You can have this whole thing done by January 1st, and with the NFL going to, or maybe the Monday after, the Monday after the first, maybe play the semifinals the week the around the first, but play the Monday after. Now all of a sudden your entire college football playoff is done before the NFL even starts theirs. To me, that's a calendar that everybody wins with because, look, the most popular sport in this country is the NFL by 1,000 miles. College football's second. And it's not close. It's not particularly close second. So find a way to work together. It's the perfect minor league system. Caleb Williams is going to arrive in Chicago a ready-made star. I mean, when we drafted Baker Mayfield, he was a ready-made star. Johnny Manziel was a ready-made star. Everybody benefits from this. Why not just work together a little bit on the calendar?
Yeah, for sure. Because I do like – one of the things I do like about it, and I think it is on the schedule, is this idea that you have if we're in the round of 8 for college football, for example, you have a Thursday game, a Friday, maybe 2 Thursday games, 2 Friday games, and then you go into the NFL after that. That is so simple. We are all creatures that love football from that first Labor Day weekend all the way through the Super Bowl. We're going to sit and watch it. So if they could work together on the timing of those games. One of my concerns with the 12-team playoff, and it's timely because we're in basketball season now, or the end of it, is if we have a dud, are you stuck with that dud, right? When I'm watching, what was a blowout in the tournament this year? UConn blows somebody out in the first, second round. I can change the channel.
Yeah.
I'm worried that we can't do that with the college football playoff if we get a dud in the first round.
It's going to happen. I mean, it's going to – and sometimes we have duds in the NFL too. My hunch is that I think that both of them are almost too big to fail as much as college football is lawless at the moment. I think that we have such a thirst for football in this country that both will just continue to grow. I think the college football playoff is going to be a monster ratings-wise, Bill. I do. I think it's going to be huge, huge numbers. We're seeing it. 15 million people watched, was it NC State Duke Sunday? 15 million people. Now, that game in February, whether it's in Raleigh or Durham, is 700,000. But what we love is a bracket, right? We love the idea of these two teams play and one moves on. And you're going to get that. We've never really had that in college football, not to this extent. I think it's going to be a monster ratings-wise. I really do.
Man, you better start trademarking that 12-team bracket and get a printout up right now.
I'm telling you, brother.
Opportunity there.
I'm telling you.
It's going to be great, because we like having that bracket in our hand. I think that's such an important thing. And you're right. I do worry a little bit about some of the matchups, but that's just because I still think the gap in college football is different from the NFL, where even going into next year, who's the national title favorites? Well, it's Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas, and they probably have a talent gap on some other teams. But, I worry about the 49-0 Liberty-Oregon game being a playoff game. But we've had, like you just said, we've had wild card games like that. I sat through the entire Chiefs-Dolphins game last year knowing that the Chiefs are going to win the entire time.
Right. Yeah, you do. All right, let's do a little hoops. You'll be up here this weekend. I talked about this off the top of the show today. I obviously had a little bit of NFL news, not much, but like this Caitlin Clark story, she has transcended sport, Bill. I mean, she was doing 5 million views on, regular season women's college basketball games. She put on a supernova performance last night in a rematch with LSU. Now kind of the only thing left to do is win it all. The task is enormous. They're going to beat Connecticut, who they play here on Friday, and then they'll theoretically have to play South Carolina in the national championship game, who I don't know is undefeated. But this is setting up pretty storybook. You've been around sports a long time. What do you make of her ascent and the way that she seems to continue to deliver every single time she's asked?
Well, the best way that I can describe it, and as you know, I live down here in the Columbus area, is coached fourth grade girls basketball this year. Every one of my girls on my team, the parents are Ohio State fans and this and that. Every one of them was a Caitlin Clark fan first.
Yeah.
That's what she's done, is she's grown that, and it's just going to continue to grow. I can't wait to see the show on Friday. I could sit here and lie and say I watched a ton of women's basketball over the years. That would be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
But this year I was tuning in more. And I was staying on it more, right? You weren't changing the channel. Like last time I watched the entire game. It's amazing what she does. And I can't wait to see the show against UConn and perhaps South Carolina. Huge for the Big Ten, by the way. Could be a huge weekend for the Big Ten if Purdue and Iowa can break these national championship droughts for the conference.
So Michigan State's the last one. That's the Flintstones. Is that 2000 for the men?
Yeah, 0-7 in title game since. And here's the thing: when they bring that up, and they're going to bring it up all weekend, people all the time. Well, look at those championship games, right? Every time the Big Ten has reached a championship game since, they've played a number 1 seed. They've played teams like Ohio State played Florida.
Yeah.
They've played teams like Michigan played Villanova. Illinois ran into a great North Carolina team. It's not like they're losing to terrible teams. So
no.
And here's my other rant, real quick. Gets fouled every time. Play about the officials. Big Ten fans, we know that. We've watched them get fouled for 3 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Who's the last Big Ten women's national champ?
Purdue in 1999, the only one. And,
oh my gosh!
Ohio State, obviously, that's the one. The women's basketball championship game I remember was 1993. Cheryl Swoops, Ohio State. Katie Smith, obviously from Logan.
Yeah.
Great game that Texas Tech won, and the Big Ten's had 3 chances since. So, I mean, if Caitlin Clark and Zach Edey win national championships or lead their teams to national championships in the same weekend, I can't think of a better weekend for the conference as far as basketball is concerned.
No, not at all. I told the story off the top of the show. You mentioned the story about the girls you coached. So I got a 4th grade son. He had AAU practice last night, and they couldn't wait to watch it. So you want to talk about transcending the normal audience. That's what she's been able to do. That you can't get a ticket for this thing. Well, you can, but it's going to be $700 a ticket to get to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse to try to watch these games on Friday night. That's how big of a demand there is for it. On the men's side of things, look, you and I are fans of history of the sport. We've followed it a long time, been fans a long time. UConn trying to become the first back-to-back champ since Florida. They are they're dominant in the way that like early 90s UNLV, 96 Kentucky, like every win's by 26 points. What they did to Illinois over the weekend, they scored 30 in a row. I mean, it was 23-23. They had 30-0 run. I mean, you just don't see that against a very quality team. And then on the other side, you mentioned Zach Edey. So he's going to be the 2-time National Player of the Year, Bill. If he wins a national title, who's the last guy to do that? To be a 2-time – is that Bill Walton? 2-time National Player of the Year and national champion?
I know Sporting News, we have that list. Luka Garza won 2 for us, and he did not win a national title. You got to go back to those legendary figures like Bill Walton. What is on the table for everyone that is so interesting to me is if UConn wins and Purdue wins, you get an old school, like our dads would talk about, hey, remember when Bill Walton went against Elvin Hayes?
Yeah.
No, we're going to get Klingon and Edey in the paint. That's amazing, 2 7-footers.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be a lot of fun if those 2 teams win. UConn, like you said, the fact that we're even putting them in the UNLV, Kentucky, Florida, and the other one was one of those, that Duke team that won it. These are amazing teams. They went on a 30-0 run. I had a buddy text me. He's like, I stepped out of the house for like 10 minutes. What happened? He goes, Illinois has the same score. So we had a pretty good laugh about that.
That same thing happened to me. It was 28-23. I had to go do something with the boys. I came back and it was like 41-23. And this is where we're at now, and that's what happened. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll get you out of here on this one. How do you think, who cuts down the nets Sunday on the women's side and Monday on the men's side?
Man, okay, so I think it will be UConn. And I know that's a boring answer on the men's. Well, I could say that for both. But the men's answer, I think, is UConn. I think Danny Hurley, this team, they're just focused. They're tougher. I think they'll find Alabama could give them some issues scoring, but I like UConn to win the whole thing. I want to pick Iowa so bad, but I just have a feeling that South Carolina has been thinking about that game since last year. Don Staley, they're quite. It's wild that we're talking about Caitlin Clark so much that Don in South Carolina, Gino and Don got to be sitting there being like, "That's fine. Talk about Caitlin all week." I mean, these are superpowers. They've been on this stage. And I'm going to be boring, Bo. I think South Carolina wins it, though it would be so awesome if Caitlin Clark could lead Iowa to a national championship and the impact that would have on the game.
Yeah, it's incredible. Just for context, South Carolina has only lost once in the last 2 years, and it was to Iowa. That's it. They've won all the other games that they've played. They lost to Iowa last year in the Final Four. Always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Thanks for your time.
Hey, no problem. Be well, Bill. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, that's our great friend Bill Bender of the Sporting News joining us on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted. Cleveland, a little higher or lower, better or worse, coming up next. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland.
Coasts. The East Coast, West
Either
Coast.
one?
Neither one.
Has he seen the Gulf of Mexico?
Nope.
What's the largest body of water you've seen? Lake Erie?
Lake Erie or Lake Superior.
Superior's bigger. What's the closest you've gotten?
Probably Lake Superior.
No. Ocean.
Ocean. For the West Coast, the closest I've been is probably New Mexico or Arizona. And then the East Coast is Washington, D.C.
Okay, that's a vicinity. You got to get that done.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like you need to get that done.
Yeah, I was telling Uno back here that I've never been to a beach. I don't know what that experience is like. I think the closest I've ever been to sand was like the little turtle beach box I used to have as a little kid.
We got sand right up here.
Yeah.
Get up to Edgewater, get yourself some sand.
Yeah, there we go.
That'll take care of you on that. Well, we
myself
got
a
to get
little
that done.
sandcastle.
We got to get you in some sand, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
Unbelievable. What isn't that a George Strait song? Oceanfront property in Arizona?
It is, yes.
Yeah, that seems about appropriate for you. We'll get you an ocean. We got to get you a little ocean view.
Looking forward to it.
We got to get that done. All right. Well, that is a fascinating Griff fact of the day. All right, time for a little higher, lower. What do you have for me today, Uno?
We got NFL Power Rankings post-free agency, this time from ESPN and their NFL Nation writers.
So I like these because it is like every one of those, every team is covered by a writer.
Yep.
So you get a pretty good feel about what they think of those teams. So I usually like when they put one of these together. I do not see this on their website, on ESPN. Do you have the? I'll just go off of you. You go.
Okay.
Take
There
it.
is I sent the rundown in your email. There should be a
But
link
I don't
there.
see the. I don't see it.
Oh, you know what? I didn't copy and paste it in there. That is my
Oh,
bad.
That's all right. Gibbe's not here. I'm not going to tell on you.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Did you put it in there?
Yeah, I do see it. I was looking at the wrong segment.
All right, hold on.
Number 1, by the way, is the Chiefs.
Swag.
So
Outrageous. Travis Scott, Jordan 1s, gorgeous blue window pane.
That's
Making
the easy
deals, running his business. All right, let me see. All
Our-
right, now I got it up.
Okay.
All right, I'm good. Go.
our Cleveland Browns, we'll start with them, came in at number 12, right ahead of the Steelers at 13, right behind the Bengals at number 11. Higher or lower for our Cleveland Browns?
I think it's. All right, let me just see who's around. Well,
Dallas.
all right, so
at
this is
9.
always tricky for me
Green Bay
because I think
10.
we're better than Dallas. I think Dallas is. I think this could be kind of a fall off the cliff situation for them this year a little bit. They did nothing in free agency, basically just running it back. So I think Dallas is a little too high, but I can't have us ahead of. They've got us ahead of Pittsburgh, which I think is appropriate, just barely. I think Pittsburgh will be much improved with the quarterback play. We talked about that yesterday. I can't put us ahead of Cincinnati and a healthy Burrow. They fixed their secondary as well. When he's healthy, and now they got Geno Stone, Von Bell at safety. The Bengals will view themselves as a Super Bowl contender. I think we aspire to be that, but we need to see it at the quarterback level consistently to be able to get there. So I think the spot we're in is fine. I just think there's a couple of teams ahead of us that people are too bullish on. So I think this is the vicinity for us, anywhere from 8 to 12. Any of that's fine. And I do think we have some questions, in terms of, who's going to – I'm looking at Nick Chubb. What's his health? What is that? We have huge questions. Deshaun's coming off a major injury. Nick Chubb's coming off a major injury. Everything else you love, but you need to see those things play out on the field before you can be too bullish on us. But I do think there's some teams ahead of us who have equal questions.
And we won't get those answers until September, so
This
we
is-
have
I mean,
no
it's-
idea.
Listen, this is – when did you jump on last year? Was it May? When did you get in the mix?
I was July, I think, right
Right
when we
before
went to the
camp.
Greenbrier.
Okay, all right.
I was here.
So what you are going to experience and have already experienced a little bit this offseason is the exact same thing that Z and I did last offseason, which is we don't know what we're going to get out of Deshaun. We're optimistic. All signs point to big bounce back, all of that. But there's nothing that we're going to see in minicamp. There's nothing that we're going to see in training camp that will matter. The only thing that will matter is how does he play when he's healthy? How does he play in the opener? So, for us, we're one of those teams where it's like everything between now and then doesn't really matter. I know that the content people aren't crazy about me saying that, but it's the reality. We have a team that is built, the age of the team, the prime of the team, the talent of the team, it's built to go win the Super Bowl. That's the objective, right? But you won't know for sure what that is until you get into the season. That's what's in the same spot we were in last year. And look what happened. We had 5 different quarterbacks.
We'll go back to the top of the list. The Chiefs, obviously, number 1. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, pretty consensus. Number 2, though, the Detroit Lions.
Wow, bullish
Higher or
on the
lower
Lions.
for them?
Very bullish on the Lions. I would have them behind San Francisco. Kansas City's 1. I'm never making the mistake again. They're picked to win the Super Bowl until they don't. So they're the right one at 1. I actually think they'll be better next year. So Kansas City's 1. I think it's too high for Detroit. They get close to San Francisco, but I think, the old Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man. So I would have them behind San Francisco still. I would have San Francisco 3. Detroit is 2. I'm fine with them being 2 on this list, which is pretty wild because a year ago we would not have said 2 NFC teams behind the Chiefs. You would have said, is it possible, last year at this time, if you're doing a power rank, you would have said Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, all 3 of those AFC teams ahead. But the other 2 have big questions. So I think those are the right 3. The Lions at 3. I think I just flipped them in San Francisco.
How about the Baltimore Ravens at number 4? They've lost
too high.
a ton this offseason. Higher or lower than 4 for Baltimore?
Yeah, I think it's way too high for them to be at 4. You mentioned the losses. We mentioned Stone. We mentioned Patrick Queen. They did bring in Derrick Henry. Obviously, that will help, but I don't know that it's that much help. They also, by the way, have to replace their entire defensive staff. So I think Baltimore comes back. I think another factor in Baltimore coming back is theoretically will have a healthy Deshaun Watson all year. The Bengals will have a healthy Joe Burrow all year. The Steelers are going to be much improved at quarterback. So I just think I don't think there's that much difference between them and those other three teams. I think all the AFC North teams should be between 7 and 11.
And the other three are 11,
They're all
12,
there.
13.
Yeah,
So they're all right there.
They're all pretty much the same.
Rounding out the top 10, Houston is at 8. Philly was at 7, by the way.
Buffalo
Then,
5, by the way.
well, we were at 5. Wow. Buffalo 5.
Yeah.
Miami 6.
6. There you go.
Philly 7. Houston all the way up at 8. Then Dallas and Green Bay. Any problems with the rest of that top 10? Any higher? Any teams that need to be out of there?
Buffalo's too high because it's possible the window came and went. They still have Allen, so you always have a chance when you have him. But to me, I think they're a little high. I think Miami that's kind of right where I think they ought to be. I know Z wasn't quite as high on them. I'm surprised the Jets aren't higher, honestly. You must be. Where do they have the Jets on this list?
The Jets are 18.
Yeah, that's too low for them and their
Get
talent.
there soon.
Yeah, if Rodgers is healthy, then I think they're going to be fine. Philly is 7. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction. I mean, remember they were 10-0. You know, I don't know if the Hurts thing is something that is. He just takes such a beating.
The tush push is a lot more demanding than we think it is.
He's taken a beating. So I think maybe it's a little optimistic on Philly. I'm big bullish on Houston. It's amazing what they've done, and I like some of the stuff they've done in the offseason. Year 2 with Stroud, I like them a lot. I like Green Bay too. I think Green Bay should be higher, and I'd have Dallas a little lower. So I would probably move up all of the AFC North teams up a couple of rungs, and then I would bring Dallas back, and I'd bring Buffalo back a little bit.
An interesting one all the way down near the bottom, the Los Angeles Chargers, 26th in this power ranking. Higher or lower for a new coach there and a whole new offense in Los Angeles?
Boy, I know they've lost a lot. They've lost Gerald Everett, they've lost Eckler, Allen, Mike Williams, but they're picking, 5th?
5, yeah.
Okay, so and we're going to have Eric Edholm on coming up here in a couple of minutes. He has a quarterback trade happening at 4 in his latest mock, and that would allow Marvin Harrison Jr. to go to the Chargers. So if Marvin Harrison Jr. slides in and you're catching passes from Justin Herbert, that wins. One other thing to note, and obviously there's a lot of Buckeye fans around here. Jim Harbaugh can coach it. He can flat out coach it. Everywhere he's been, they win right away. They won right away in San Francisco when he was there. They won right away in Stanford when he was there. They immediately improved at Michigan when he was there, and then it was a lull and then back up. But he's going to have them winning. They'll play a winning brand of football. That is way too low for the Los Angeles Chargers, just on the fact that they have Herbert. And I still like a lot of their talent. That's way too low.
I've seen them very low in a lot of these, and that was been the one team I'm surprised people
below
are lower
Tennessee,
on. Yeah.
Below the Raiders? Herbert Minshew.
Yeah.
They've got him below the
10
Raiders.
times out of 10.
Minnesota. They got him behind Minnesota on this list.
I mean, there's a lot of teams with
who's quarterbacking Minnesota?
Potential rookie quarterbacks that we don't know anything about that are ahead of Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh.
Sam Darnold?
Yeah.
Caleb Williams in year 1? I think they got Atlanta, by the way, criminally low on this as well. I think Atlanta, I'm big on them. I could see Atlanta. I would have Atlanta more like 12. They got him 19 on this list.
Watch out for those Falcons.
Yeah, that's a lot. They're better than Tampa next year. Indy's way too high. They got Indy 16.
This was a weird list. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to a lot of it, but there were a lot
Yeah,
of
that's a strange. I agree.
Weird numbers on this one.
Very, very strange list. All right, good job out of you though. Strange lists make for good content, so that's a win, Uno. All right, coming up next, we'll do a little NFL draft talk. Eric Edholm joins us of NFL.com. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, let's head on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. Our good buddy, NFL.com's Eric Edholm joins us to talk a little bit about the draft. You got a latest mock draft out of your own that we're going to go over here in a second, my friend. Let's just start here, though. When you do a mock draft, Eric, are you saying this is what I would do or this is what I think they will do?
Yeah, so my final mock draft is most certainly 100% a prediction of what I think is going to happen. Now, obviously, with trades and everything else that shakes up the draft, it's very difficult to do that. I sometimes take some liberties. Like, for instance, I put J.J. McCarthy at number 2 to the Commanders, and that was a pick that a lot of people kind of attached to and said, whoa, Now, do I think that is guaranteed to be the pick, or do I have a super strong feeling about that? No, but he's been rising so much that I think there's at least a possibility. So again, I do play around with it a little bit, but yeah, the closer we get to April 25th, the more gospel I hope it becomes.
How do you? This is such silly season right now, and you mentioned JJ. We have the combine, then we have the pro days, and then we have this dead period, and this is kind of the silly season where you see guys rise and fall. And a couple of weeks ago, it was like, well, Marvin Harrison's maybe the third best receiver in this draft, and I haven't watched him play for 3 years. I'm like, this is insane. I don't know what's going on here. How do you sift through that this time of year?
Yeah, I have to remind myself. It's only taken me about 20 years to figure this out, but a lot of the things that you hear at the combine, which starts late February, ends early March, whatever. A lot of the things you hear from other people's reporting, talking to people in the hallways in Indianapolis, conversations late at night, early in the morning, whatever. That intel ends up being pretty good, and there is this misinformation period that definitely comes about where Mac Jones is definitely going third to the 49ers, and this player is a guaranteed top 10 pick, and then he falls to 25th. I mean, we hear this stuff every year, and obviously I think some of it originated in March, so you can kind of latch on to some of that, and other things are going to just be completely off the radar, the stuff that we couldn't have predicted or never really came out before the draft. So there's no foolproof way of doing it, but I do try to remember that stuff you hear, April Fool's Day lasts about 3 weeks in the NFL.
I agree.
So
that's
a good reminder.
It's funny you bring that up. Nathan and I talk about that all the time on the show. Like, really, the stuff at the combine's the best intel. That's the closest to the real truth as you're going to get. And really, the opinions oftentimes I've found, I'm sure you've fed that out as well, they don't really change that much. Usually what people feel about in February, they feel that way when the draft comes around. So I think that's funny that I feel the exact same way. All right, let's start at the top. Obviously, everyone has had Caleb Williams number 1 to Chicago. You do as well. Is there anything that you could imagine preventing him from being a Bear on draft night?
Something happening off the field between now and then. Obviously, I don't think it will. I mean, I really think that's. I wouldn't know that it's locked in, but I don't think they would tell people that. But I do feel like that's the guy they're focusing in on. So yeah, I mean, you never know. You never truly get word until the pick comes in or until other people are reporting it en masse. But yeah, I would say that it's as close to a certainty as it could be. What is he?
Give me what do you believe he will be? Because it's again, silly season. You get a wide range of opinion. He's been penciled in here, sharpied in here all year.
I mean, if Caleb Williams, if the scheme is smart and there's good protection, he can do so much. I think where Caleb kind of got in trouble in college was, and he has the ability, obviously, to extend plays and move outside the pocket and throw on the run and, deliver the ball with just about every arm angle imaginable. And, he's special at that. There are guys who try to do that who can't. I think he's fine doing it. I don't mind him taking those risks. But, the more often he tried to keep plays alive, either sacks or fumbles or occasionally one of those throws was off target and, his interception totals are low. But, he did put some balls in harm's way that you thought that could have been prevented. That didn't need to happen, right? So there are you're going to have to live with a couple of warts in his play, but I do think he's special. And if he goes to Chicago, Keenan Allen's going to be a great resource for him and a great option for him. And so is DJ Moore. And Cole Kmet really came on. So they have some pretty good weapons there that, I think will be a good starting place for him in his career. But, it wouldn't be shocking with all the talent at quarterback in this class. Somebody could outperform him year one, and that, kicks up the pressure a little bit.
Yeah, so isn't it amazing they didn't make a coaching change there? Like just start fresh?
I was a little surprised. Yeah, I was surprised. I think when prior to the Green Bay game in week 18, they really played some good football. Defensively, improved offense. Everything seemed to be kind of flowing. You thought, man, this is a team that was on the verge of 0-5, right? They got that road win to prevent it, but weren't looking very good the first month or two of the season, and things did seem to get better. So maybe they were hinging on the internal improvement from a really tough spot. But I agree. Usually when when you've sort of decided to move forward with a new quarterback and you've already had issues with last year's offensive coordinator, you tend to make a change as opposed to this arranged marriage kind of thing.
Yeah, it's strange. Let's get to the McCarthy conversation. He's been the hot topic. You have him second to Washington. What has changed, or is this something JJ has done or something that Daniels and May have not done over the last month?
Well, let's give them credit, obviously, for the playoff run. Even if you rightfully say like Michigan was a running football team and they did that exceptionally well. When JJ had to deliver, the game-tying drive against Alabama and some really nice play against Washington in the final. I think people have grown to appreciate where he is and what he can be. But I think also the interview process too, as teams have gotten to know him, at least from what I've heard, he's kind of blown them away with his equanimity and his calm and his intelligence and just sort of all the things that you can only teach to a degree. You either have it or you don't to some measure. And, obviously Jim Harbaugh has gone a long way to try to pump up his stock, and it would be great for Jim if JJ went ahead of the 5th pick of the Chargers pick. But he's been saying this stuff prior to taking the job in LA. So I tend to believe it, even though Jim obviously will tell some stories and whatnot. But yeah, I just think there's a belief that he's got good tangibles and very good intangibles, if not excellent, rare intangibles in terms of leadership, smarts, competitiveness, all the things that you'd be hard pressed to find a great quarterback who didn't have that quality.
Anyone who watched his run, and a lot of college football fans around here who watched his run and the way he handled all the media stuff the last 60 days at Michigan, knew that he would blow away NFL ownership and executives with the way he taught. He's just an impressive kid. He is. And they had a lot thrown at him in the last month, obviously. All right.
It's that yoga.
Yeah.
That yoga gets you're centered, you know what I mean? So.
It is, man, you do. So this is that you mentioned Harbaugh. This is the dream scenario because you have him going. You got McCarthy at 2, then you got Jaden 3 to New England, and then Minnesota comes up at 4 to get Drake May. So they address their quarterback issue there. And so first non-quarterback off the board is Marvin Harrison Jr. If you are Arizona, what does it take for you to come out of 4 and just take Marvin? It feels like a sure thing for me as there is in this draft, and make that deal. What does it take? What's that deal look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you're the Cardinals, you're asking yourself how much of a difference is there between either Marvin or Malik Neighbors, or if they could have Rome Odunze as their top receiver for all I know. Whoever their number one receiver is or non-quarterback is. What's the difference between him and trading down to the early teens, let's say, or, somewhere within the top 10 to the kind of players you potentially have available at those spots? That's really the question. And receiver is a very talented, deep group this year. It seems like we say that, if not every year, almost every year. Last year, not as much, but this year, certainly. And, if you believe the chatter out there that some teams have Neighbors over Harrison, or, I think Brian Thomas is just as good as some of the top 3 there. So then maybe you do that deal and say, we love Marvin Harrison, we love Malik Neighbors, one of those guys, but getting a second first-round pick and maybe something else, a little sweetener too, it's pretty appealing. And you can still get your big receiver, you can still get help on defense or offensive line or wherever else you want to spend that extra pick with. So they've put that for sale sign on that pick.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, they'll drive a hard bargain.
Yeah, and to be fair, and you have them coming back in. So you have them at 8 trading with Atlanta and getting Rome Odunze. And now all of a sudden you're picking up an extra one and you're moving up and you still get a top-flight receiver. In terms of, you mentioned the receiver position. I don't think that'll be one for us here in Cleveland. We don't pick until second round, obviously. But when you think about, we think about the depth at the running back room and maybe linebacker, would offensive tackle for the Browns. Where is this draft's strengths and weaknesses for you? Where's the depth of talent?
Yeah, I think, again, like you said, wide receiver may not be an issue. That's probably my deepest position if I had to pick one. Offensive tackle I don't know if it would be second, but it would be pretty darn close behind. I mean, the first round especially, you're going to see a lot of really talented players. So that might be just as deep as anything else. And, I think you're still talking about, borderline first-round caliber talent that could make it all the way to 45 or 50, somewhere in that range. I mean, we'll see. Everybody's, got at least one sort of flaw in their game, but there are a lot of tackles this year who I think at least, deserve to be mentioned in those top 35 or 40 picks or so. So that's one of them. Quarterback is a deep spot. Obviously, it sort of depends what they think later in the draft at that spot, but the edge, corner are pretty deep, maybe corner a little more than edge. I think running back is – I don't love the high-end talent this year. There isn't a Bijan Robinson or a Jahmyr Gibbs type of guy that's going to go in the first round. But, Jonathan Brooks probably would have been a first-rounder had he not suffered the ACL and finished out his season the way, other Texas running backs have in recent years. And so – I think it's a better crop than people may realize, and the depth there is pretty good. You also have a lot of different types of backs this year too, which I like. I mean, sometimes you sort of see the range isn't that big. They're all kind of roughly the same size. They all do roughly the same things, and this year's a little different. I mean, we do have different styles of runners and different roles that they'll be expected to play. So. Yeah, it's not bad. It's just lacking a little pizzazz, I would say.
Yeah, my gut hunch is for us, if it is an offensive skill position player, receiver, running back, whatever it would be, it's almost like you're just looking for a weapon. Like you've seen that with Kansas City recently. Like you just get us some weapons, we'll put them in space and try to create some things. And I think that's probably what the Browns are going to try to do offensively next year with Ken Dorsey coming in, playing out of the shotgun a lot more. Last year's draft, Eric, we had – and I don't know if any of us realized it in the moment, certainly not to the extent, but you had Houston go from a team that looked like it had no future to one of the brightest futures in the league like that. When you look at how this thing sets up this year, is there a team now a little more than a month away from the draft, less than a month away from the draft, that you look at it and go, boy, they could flip this thing in a hurry if they do this right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Bears, right? I mean, they have the 1st and the 9th picks in the draft. I know they'd look into adding a second rounder if they can. They didn't get as much for the Justin Fields trade as a lot of people imagine they might. They haven't been quite as busy in free agency in terms of the big ticket kind of players that I thought they might, but, still getting some really good veterans. And again, just the positive momentum we saw after the first month of last season, they're kind of already riding that wave a little bit. So, they'd have to be on that list. You mentioned the Cardinals. There's a scenario that could end, they could end up with 3 first-round picks. It wouldn't stun me if they got, if they nailed every one of those picks or came darn close to doing so. Seattle might be on the downswing. Obviously San Francisco I don't think is going anywhere, but Aaron Donald just retired with the Rams. There's an opportunity there. And Jonathan Gannon, I didn't know what to make of him last year, but he coached his team well. I thought they played hard every single game, even if they didn't, have enough to win every. They won 2 games in December that were pretty big, and I don't know. They're an interesting team for me to keep an eye on. Jets, obviously after last year could use a stud at number 10. So there are a few teams that could rebound pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a fun draft. It's a fun list to look at. Great mock draft from NFL.com's Eric Edholm. Eric, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate you.
All right, have a great day. See ya.
All right, that's Eric Edholm, NFL.com, joining to talk a little bit of the draft. His latest mock is out now. You can check it out. Again, he has J.J. McCarthy as the high riser all the way at number 2 to Washington. He joined the program on the Twisted Tea Hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. So much more to come. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, there you go. Tomorrow, First Friday, we'll be back at it. The next level is coming up next. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland.